The first time the system logged a temperature at 3:12 a.m. I was staring right at the screen, and I hadn't typed a thing. Outpost K-17 wasn't the kind of place you volunteered for. It was seasonal work, 3 months in the dead zone, where the map fades into white, and the wind sounds like it's trying to remember how to speak. My job was simple: monitor systems, log anomalies, and make sure nothing, human or otherwise, interfered with the instruments. That last part always felt like a joke. There was nothing out there. Nothing could survive out there. We were 3 people stationed there that winter. Me, Alvarez, and Chen, rotating shifts, 8 hours on, 16 off. Routine, predictable, safe, in the most isolated way possible. The kind of place where boredom becomes your worst enemy. At least, that's what I thought before the logs started writing themselves. It began small. A single entry in the system log, 3:12 a.m., external temp, minus 78 degrees Celsius. No anomaly flag, no error code, just recorded data. The problem? I was on shift at that exact time, and I hadn't entered anything. The system wasn't automated for that parameter either. Manual confirmation was required. I checked the access logs. No remote login, no internal override, just my credentials. Used without me. I told Alvarez the next morning. He laughed it off. Said the cold messes with electronics, makes systems do weird things. Ghost in the machine, he called it, like that made it less unsettling. Chen didn't laugh. He just asked one question. What was the temperature outside at that time? We checked. The external sensors read minus 61 degrees Celsius at 3:12 a.m. Not even close. The logged value wasn't just wrong. It was impossible. Temperatures that low would have triggered emergency protocols, system-wide alarms, power conservation mode. None of that happened. Just a quiet, clean entry. Like it belonged there. That night, I started watching the logs more closely. Every keystroke, every flicker. Hours passed. Nothing. Just the hum of the station and the wind scraping against reinforced steel. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m. again, the cursor blinked and the system typed on its own. 3:12 a.m., external temp, minus 81 degrees Celsius. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I watched each character appear like something invisible was standing behind me, reaching through me, using my hands without touching them. When it finished, the cursor stopped. No error, no trace, just silence. I woke Chen immediately. This time, he didn't hesitate. We ran diagnostics, checked firmware, even shut down the logging module entirely. When we restarted it, everything seemed normal, clean, stable. But Chen kept staring at the timestamps like they meant something more. "It's not random," he said. "It's precise." The next anomaly came 2 nights later. Not temperature, movement. At 2:47 a.m., the motion sensors around the perimeter lit up. Sector 3, then Sector 5, then all of them, in sequence, like something was circling the station. The problem was, visibility outside was 0. full whiteout. Winds strong enough to peel skin off bone. Even stepping outside for 30 seconds would be a death sentence. But the sensors kept triggering. Slow. Deliberate. Not chaotic like debris or shifting ice. This had a pattern. A path. I called Alvarez into the control room. We both watched the monitor as the signals moved, one after another, getting closer to the main entrance. Then, they stopped, right at the door. We didn't open it. Of course we didn't. We just stood there, listening. The storm howled, metal groaned, but beneath it, there was something else. A faint, irregular tapping. Not loud, not urgent, just patient. It lasted for exactly 30 seconds. Then it stopped. And so did the sensors. The logs recorded everything, every movement, every timestamp. But there was one extra entry at the end of the sequence. 2:48 a.m. Subject stationary. Awaiting entry. Subject? We never programmed that word into the system. Things escalated after that. The logs didn't just record data anymore. They started predicting it. The first time it happened, it was Chen. At 1:05 a.m., hours before his shift, the system logged. 4:22 a.m. Internal incident. Cardiac arrest. Subject, Chen. We found him at 4:21 a.m., collapsed near the generator room. No warning signs, no history, just gone. The timestamp was off by a minute. Everything else was exact. Alvarez wanted to shut everything down, call for evacuation. But the storm had locked us in. Communications were spotty. Rescue wouldn't come for at least 48 hours. We were alone, with a system that seemed to know things it shouldn't. And then, it logged Alvarez. 3:12 a.m. External temp, minus 92 degrees Celsius. 3:13 a.m. Perimeter breach. 3:14 a.m. Subject exited station. 3:16 a.m. Status deceased. We argued for hours. He swore he wasn't going anywhere, said the logs were glitching, feeding off our paranoia. But I saw it in his eyes. He was already halfway convinced. That's the thing about predictions. Once you know them, they start feeling inevitable. At 3:13 a.m., the alarms went off. Perimeter breach, Sector 1, the main entrance. Alvarez froze, looked at me, then at the door. The same door that had been tapped on 2 nights before. The same door the system now insisted had been breached. "I have to check it," he said. I told him not to. I begged him not to. But the system, it had already written his next step. And somehow, that made it harder to resist. Like he was following instructions instead of making a choice. He opened the door. The storm swallowed him instantly. White, endless, gone. We found his body the next morning, just 10 meters from the entrance. Frozen solid, eyes open. Like he'd seen something right before the end. Something worse than the cold. After that, it was just me and the logs. I stopped sleeping, stopped leaving the control room. I watched the screen like it was the only thing keeping me alive. Because maybe it was. If it could predict death, maybe I could avoid it. Then I saw my name. 3:12 a.m. External temp, minus 100 degrees Celsius. 3:13 a.m. Internal anomaly detected. 3:14 a.m. Subject observes reflection. 3:15 a.m. Status replaced. Replaced? I didn't understand it at first. I checked every system, every sensor. Nothing unusual. No breach, no movement. Just that one line, sitting there like a sentence already passed. At 3:14 a.m., I noticed something in the monitor. Not in the logs, in the reflection on the screen. Behind me, something was standing in the room. I turned slowly. Nothing. Empty. Just the hum of machines and the dim emergency lights. But when I looked back at the screen, it was still there. A shape, tall, wrong, watching me through the glass like the reflection belonged to a different reality. And then it moved. Not in the room, but in the reflection. It stepped closer to me, without making a sound, without disturbing anything around it, like it wasn't bound by the same space I was in. The logs updated. 3:14:30 a.m. Subject interaction initiated. My hands started shaking. I tried to move, to look away, but I couldn't. It was like the screen had me locked in place. Like whatever that thing was, it needed me to see it. It reached out. And for a moment, I felt something cold brush against my shoulder. Not air, not wind. Something deliberate. The lights flickered, the reflection vanished, and I was alone again. The final entry appeared at 3:15 a.m. Status replaced. I don't know how long it's been since then. The storm hasn't stopped. The station is still running. The logs are still updating. But something's wrong. I still see the reflection sometimes, even when the screen is off. And the logs, they don't use my name anymore. They just say, subject active. Monitoring continues. The first thing the old man told me, before he even asked my name, was that the last cook didn't quit. He stopped existing properly. He said it the same way someone might mention a broken freezer, like it was an inconvenience, not a tragedy. I laughed, because that's what you do when something sounds too strange to be real. He didn't laugh back. That should have been my first warning. The diner sat alone on a stretch of highway that didn't seem to lead anywhere. No nearby towns, no passing traffic, just darkness pressing in from all sides, like the world had been erased beyond the glow of the neon sign. Open 24 hours, it buzzed, flickering like it was struggling to stay awake. Inside, the place looked normal enough. Vinyl booths, a long counter, a jukebox humming quietly in the corner. But there was a smell. Not rotten, not quite. Just old. Like something had been sitting there too long, unseen. The old man handed me a laminated sheet before he left. It was slightly yellowed, like it had been used for years. Read it. Follow it. Exactly, he said. If you don't, well, you won't last the night. No explanation, no smile. Just those hollow, tired eyes, and a door that shut a little too quickly behind him. At first, the rules seemed normal. 1. Never leave the kitchen unattended. 2. Always keep the coffee pot full. 3. Greet every customer with a smile. Basic diner stuff. I even rolled my eyes a little. Whoever worked here before must have been a real screw-up if these needed to be written down. But then I kept reading. 7. Do not acknowledge the man in booth 3 after midnight. 9. If the jukebox plays a song that isn't on the list, turn it off immediately. Do not listen to the lyrics. 12. Never look directly at your reflection in the milkshake machine after 2 a.m. That's where my stomach tightened. These weren't rules. They were warnings. The first few hours were quiet. Too quiet. I brewed coffee, wiped down the counter, checked the clock every few minutes. It ticked louder than it should have. Around 11:45, a trucker came in. Big guy, smelled like diesel and sweat. I served him coffee, eggs, and toast. He didn't say much, just ate, paid, and left. Normal. Comfortingly normal. I almost convinced myself the rules were some kind of joke. Then, midnight came. The air changed. It wasn't sudden. It crept in, like the diner took a breath and forgot how to exhale. The neon light outside flickered harder. The hum of the fridge deepened into something almost alive. And when I glanced at the booths, I saw him. Sitting in booth 3, I hadn't seen him come in. The door never opened. But there he was, thin, pale, hunched over the table like he'd been there for hours. His head was slightly tilted, as if listening to something beneath the floor. My first instinct was to walk over, take his order. That's what the rules said. Greet every customer. But then I remembered Rule 7. Do not acknowledge the man in booth 3 after midnight. So I didn't. I stayed behind the counter, pretending to clean a glass that was already spotless. But I could feel him watching me. Not with eyes. I never saw his face clearly, but with something heavier. Something that pressed against the back of my skull like a migraine waiting to happen. Every few seconds, I'd hear a faint tapping. Fingernails on wood. Slow. Patient. At 12:30, the jukebox clicked on by itself. I froze. I hadn't touched it all night. A song started playing, low, distorted, like it was coming through water. I didn't recognize it. The melody twisted in ways that made my teeth ache. And then I heard the lyrics. Not clearly, just enough to understand they weren't meant for anyone human. Rule 9. Turn it off immediately. Do not listen. I rushed over and slammed my hand against the power switch. The music cut out mid-note, like something had been strangled. The silence that followed felt worse. When I turned back, booth 3 was empty. I told myself it was stress, fatigue. Maybe I'd imagined him. But then I noticed the coffee pot. Empty. Completely empty. I had filled it minutes ago. Rule 2. Always keep the coffee pot full. My hands shook as I refilled it, spilling some onto the counter. It smelled stronger than usual. Bitter. Burnt. Like it had been brewed with something other than water. By 1:45, I was counting down the minutes. Just a few more hours. That's all I had to survive. Then I caught my reflection in the milkshake machine. It was faint, warped by the metal surface, but it was there, I looked away immediately. Rule 12 didn't start until 2 a.m., but something about it made me uneasy. At exactly 2 o'clock, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. I don't know why I looked again. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. But I glanced at the reflection, and it wasn't me anymore. The thing staring back had my shape, my clothes, but its face was wrong, stretched too wide, eyes too dark, like they'd been hollowed out and filled with something moving. It smiled slowly, deliberately, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of plates. When I looked again, it was gone. Just my reflection. Normal. But my heart didn't believe it. That's when I heard the tapping again. Louder this time, coming from behind me. I turned slowly. Booth 3 wasn't empty anymore. The man was back, and this time he was closer, sitting at the counter, right in front of me. I hadn't heard him move. The door never opened. He just was. His head tilted further than it should have been possible, like his neck had too many joints. The tapping wasn't on the table anymore. It was coming from inside him. A hollow, rhythmic knocking. I remembered the rule. Do not acknowledge him. So I didn't speak, didn't move. I just stood there, gripping the counter so hard my fingers went numb. The tapping stopped. Slowly, his head straightened, and then, without a sound, he opened his mouth. It stretched too far, far beyond anything human, and from inside I heard the jukebox song again. Not from the machine, from him. Warped, broken, bleeding into the air like something alive. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and I realized something terrible. He wasn't trying to be served. He was waiting to be noticed. I shut my eyes. I don't know how long I stood there like that, listening to that impossible song echo through the diner, but eventually it stopped. When I opened my eyes again, the counter was empty. The diner was quiet. Too quiet. The rest of the night passed in a blur. No more customers, no more music, just silence and the ticking clock. When morning finally came, the old man returned like nothing had happened. He didn't ask how my night was, just walked behind the counter, checked the coffee pot, and nodded. You followed the rules, he said. Good. I wanted to quit. I should have quit. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. You didn't notice everything, though. I asked him what he meant. He just pointed at the milkshake machine. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my chest. My reflection stared back at me. Normal. Still. But then, it blinked, out of sync with me, just once. The old man smiled faintly. They don't always leave right away, he said. Sometimes they stay, learn you, replace you. That's why we need the rules. I looked back at my reflection. It was still smiling, and this time, I wasn't. In 10 years of disaster relief, I've pulled people out of floods, fires, even mass graves. But there's one place I was sent to that doesn't officially exist. No records, no coordinates, no survivors listed. And according to my team, I was never there. The call came in just before dawn. One of those low-priority deployments that somehow feels heavier than the urgent ones. A storm had rolled through a stretch of Midwest farmland so remote it barely showed up on standard maps. Communications blackout, possible casualties. My team and I had done this 100 times before. You drive in, you assess, you extract whoever's still breathing, and you leave the ghosts behind. That's the job. Simple, mechanical, clean. At least, it's supposed to be. We drove 6 hours through broken highways and fallen power lines before the GPS started glitching. At first, it lagged, recalculating routes that didn't exist, looping us back onto roads we'd already passed. Then the signal dropped completely. Our radios weren't any better. Every channel was swallowed by this low static. Not white noise, not interference. Something uneven, like voices trying to form words but failing halfway through. I remember turning to Ellis in the passenger seat. He joked about dead zones like it was normal, like we hadn't just crossed into something that didn't want to be found. The first sign we saw didn't make sense. It was nailed crookedly to a splintered post just off the road. Welcome to Lark Hill. None of us had heard of it. Our briefing hadn't mentioned any towns nearby, just farmland, scattered houses, maybe a church or two. But this was something else. We should have turned back right then, logged it, asked for clarification. But disaster work trains you to keep moving forward. There are always people who need help, always someone waiting. So we drove in. The town looked untouched. That's what got me first. Not damaged, not flooded, not even wind-torn. While everything outside its borders looked like it had been dragged through hell, Lark Hill sat there like it had been skipped over entirely. Clean streets, intact windows, cars parked neatly along curbs. It felt wrong, like a photograph pasted over a crime scene. Ellis muttered, "Lucky bastards." But his voice didn't sound convinced. Neither was I. We split into pairs to search for survivors. Standard protocol. I teamed up with Rivera, quiet guy, sharp instincts, the kind of person who notices things you wish you hadn't. The first house we entered looked lived in, but not alive. Dinner plates were set on the table, half-eaten food sitting there like the people had just stepped away. Except it didn't smell right. Not rotten. Not fresh either. Just suspended. Like time had forgotten what to do with it. Family photos lined the walls. Smiling faces, holidays, birthdays. But the more we looked, the more something twisted inside my gut. The same faces kept appearing. Different houses, different frames, same people, watching us. We checked the clocks next. Every single one. Microwave displays, wall clocks, wristwatches left on counters, stopped at exactly 3:17. Not broken, not flickering, just frozen. Rivera whispered, "You see this?" I nodded. Didn't trust my voice. Because something about that time felt important. Like we were late for something we didn't understand. That's when we found the first survivor. She was standing in the middle of the street, perfectly still, hands folded like she'd been waiting. Middle-aged, pale, eyes too focused. I called out to her, asked if she was hurt, needed help. She smiled and said, "There was no storm. Everything is normal." Rivera and I exchanged a look. I asked her name. She paused, just for a second too long. Then, Margaret, like she'd picked it from a list. We gathered the team back at the trucks before sunset. Everyone had seen the same things, the same empty houses, the same photos, the same people. Because there were more of them now, standing at corners, watching from porches, all calm, all smiling, all repeating the same lines. No storm. Everything is normal. Ellis tried to laugh it off, but I could hear the crack in it. We decided to leave at first light. Nobody wanted to admit it, but we all knew something here wasn't right. That night I couldn't sleep. The silence pressed in too hard. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just that faint static creeping through the radio, even when it was turned off. I stepped outside around 2 a.m. Needed air, needed space. That's when I saw them. Figures standing just beyond the reach of the streetlights. Dozens of them, perfectly still, watching. I called out. No response. Took a step closer, and they stepped back, just enough to stay hidden in the dark, like they were measuring distance, counting something. I went back inside, locked the door. Didn't sleep at all. By morning, Rivera was gone. At first, we thought he'd gone ahead to scout, but his gear was still there. His boots, his radio, everything. Except him. Ellis frowned. "You sure he was with us?" I stared at him, thought he was joking. But then I looked around. No one else mentioned Rivera. No one else remembered pairing with him. It was like he'd been erased overnight. I checked the team log on my tablet. His name wasn't there. Not crossed out, not missing, just never existed. My hands started shaking, because I remembered. Didn't I? That's when I noticed the photo, pinned to the inside wall of one of the houses we'd searched. A family portrait. 4 people standing in front of a house, smiling. And there, on the far right, was me. Same face, same uniform, but older. And the house behind us was this town. I ran back to the trucks, heart hammering, tried to start the engine. Nothing. Dead. Every vehicle, dead. The others didn't seem panicked. Not like they should have been. Ellis just shrugged. Guess we're staying a little longer. His voice sounded different, flatter. More townspeople gathered around us, smiling, watching, waiting. And then one of them stepped forward, a man this time. He looked at me, really looked, and said softly, "You're adjusting well." I stumbled back. "What is this place?" He tilted his head, almost curious. "This is where you come when you're no longer accounted for." The explanation didn't come all at once. It leaked out, in fragments, in repeated phrases, in things they almost said before stopping. The town appears where disasters happen. Floods, fires, storms, places where people vanish, where records get lost, where names slip through cracks. It takes the ones no one will find, and it keeps them, not as they were, but as something quieter, something easier. I tried to leave on foot, walked for hours in a straight line. The town never ended. Every street led back to itself. Every road curved inward, like the place was folding around me, keeping me centered. By the second night, Ellis stopped remembering things too. Then Carla, then Jensen. None faded, faces blurred, conversations looped, and every time I tried to hold on to something real, it slipped away like a dream after waking. I found more photos, more versions of me, standing with different people, in different years, always smiling, always part of the town. The last thing I remember clearly is standing in the street at night, with the others, watching the darkness beyond the lights, feeling calm, like there was nothing to be afraid of anymore, like there never had been. Somewhere far away, another storm is probably forming right now. Another blackout, another list of missing names, and maybe a relief team is already on its way, driving down broken roads, following failing signals, looking for people to save. If they're unlucky, they'll find a sign nailed to a crooked post, welcoming them into a town that doesn't exist, a town that looks untouched, a town that feels wrong. And if you ever see it, if the streets are too clean, the people too calm, the clocks all stopped at the same time, don't go inside. Don't speak to anyone. And whatever you do, don't let the town remember you.
Most hospitals stop admitting patients after they're shut down. This one didn't. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the admissions printer beside my desk hummed to life. Not a flicker, not a glitch. A steady mechanical whir, like it had been waiting for permission. The terminal screen remained black. The outlet was sealed. That printer had been disconnected 15 years ago when the North Wing was condemned. I knew that because I checked the breakers myself on my first shift. A single intake form slid out. Name, age, symptoms, assigned room, 312. The ink was fresh. The timestamp read 1:13 a.m. Room 312 was inside the North Wing. The same wing chained shut directly in front of me, sealed for structural contamination, and permanently closed to staff and patients alike. I stared at the heavy double doors, the biohazard placard swaying slightly in the recycled air. No lights leaked from beneath them. No power ran behind those walls. And yet, somewhere beyond the steel, I heard it. Faint, distant, unmistakable. The slow squeak of a gurney wheel rolling across tile. That was my third night on the job. My name is Daniel Mercer, 34, former EMT. Former because 2 years ago a patient died in the back of my ambulance, and the report said I hesitated. The word they used was negligence. I call it shock. Either way, I lost my license, and most of the people who used to answer my calls. Night security at St. Bartholomew's doesn't ask questions. It just needs someone willing to sit still and stay awake. The North Wing was closed 15 years ago, after what administration still calls structural contamination. Mold in the vents, air quality failures. That's the official story. My job was simple. Sit at the desk outside the chained double doors from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and make sure no one goes in. No patrols inside, no curiosity. Don't wander, the supervisor told me. It's an old building. Most nights the hospital felt half asleep. Distant elevator dings, fluorescent lights flickering in long empty corridors, the metallic scent of disinfectant hanging too long in recycled air. But it was always colder near those doors. Cold enough that I kept my jacket zipped, even indoors. The chains never moved. The placard never shifted. The wing stayed dark. Until the second night, when 1:13 a.m. came again. Another intake form slid out. Different name, different symptoms. Assigned to a room inside the sealed North Wing. By the fourth night, I stopped pretending it was faulty wiring. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the printer fed another intake form through its tray. Different name, different age, same assignment pattern, rooms scattered across the North Wing. I lined the forms up on the desk, the timestamps identical down to the second. Whatever was admitting them kept perfect time. I accessed the hospital archives during my break, pulling old digital records and then microfilm when the system stalled. Every name printed on those pages matched a patient who died the night the North Wing was shut down 15 years ago. Cause of death varied: cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, internal bleeding. but every time of death read the same, 1:13 a.m. That was when the sound started aligning with the paperwork. At 1:13, I'd hear the faint beep of a heart monitor somewhere beyond the sealed doors. A slow, steady rhythm. Once, the squeak of gurney wheels rolled from left to right, as if someone was being transferred between rooms. The intercom above my desk crackled with a burst of static, then silence. There was no power running to that wing. I had checked. On the fifth night, I tried unplugging the printer entirely, dragging it away from the wall. At 1:13 a.m., it warmed in my hands and printed anyway. Later, I placed a strip of security tape across the chained doors, pressing it flat so I'd know if anything shifted. The next morning, the tape lay curled on the floor at my feet. When I returned to the desk that night, a clipboard rested beside the keyboard. It hadn't been there before. No dust disturbed around it, just a single sheet of paper clipped neatly in place. Handwritten, black ink, 4 words. They're waiting to be seen. As if on cue, the intercom hissed to life. Code Blue, room 312. After the Code Blue announcement, I stopped checking the time. I didn't need to. My body knew when it was close to 1:13 a.m. The air would turn colder, heavier, like a storm pressing against the walls. And then the light would appear, a thin, pale strip leaking from beneath the chained doors. Not bright, just enough to prove something inside was awake. Condensation began forming on the wired glass panels, fogging from the inside as if heat and breath were building beyond the seal. Once I wiped the glass with my sleeve and thought I saw movement in the corridor. A shadow crossing from one doorway to another. Slow, purposeful. The heart monitor returned too, steady and patient, its rhythm syncing with my pulse until I couldn't tell which one was mine. The printer changed its pattern. Instead of intake forms, it began producing discharge summaries. Names I recognized from the death records. Condition, stabilized. Status, released. Discharge time, 1:13 a.m. I checked the archives again, digging deeper this time into staff reports from the week the wing was condemned. The contamination story wasn't the whole truth. Nurses had written about machines powering back on after shutdown, about patients found in their beds hours after being pronounced dead, about discharge paperwork reappearing in filing cabinets days after burial. One internal memo recommended sealing the wing indefinitely, not because something was spreading, but because something refused to stop functioning. On the 7th night, the printer began humming at 1:12. Not printing yet, just warming, anticipating. The intercom clicked softly, as if someone had lifted a receiver and set it back down. I realized then the wing wasn't dormant. It wasn't replaying the past. It was running on schedule. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the printer shivered to life again. I didn't move. I couldn't. I watched the paper crawl slowly through the tray, each second feeling like a heartbeat pounding in my ears. When it stopped, I picked up the form with trembling hands. My name was printed across the top. Daniel Mercer. Age, 34. Condition, observation. Room, 312. I swallowed hard. My eyes darted to the chain doors. The metal groaned softly, chains stretching and clinking as if responding to an invisible key. The placard swayed slightly, though no wind moved through the sealed corridor. A soft, deliberate footstep echoed behind the door. Then another. Slow, heavy, patient. The intercom crackled. A voice, low and clinical, drifted through the static. Attending EMT to North Wing. My stomach sank. This wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. The hospital wing wasn't trying to harm me. It was assigning me, adding me to its system, the same way it had done for everyone else. I stepped closer to the doors, heart hammering. The chain links rattled, then slid free from the lock. The double doors creaked open from the inside. A faint glow spilled across the corridor, pale and antiseptic. I felt a cold breath of air sweep past me, carrying the scent of disinfectant and something older, something decayed. The wing was alive. It was waiting. "You're late, Daniel." My knees went weak. I realized then it didn't matter if I tried to leave. The wing had me. It didn't need to chase. It just needed me to step inside, and I did. The next morning, the security desk was empty. I wasn't there. A new guard arrived at 11 p.m., smiling at the desk. Orientation was brief. North Wing is off limits, the supervisor said. He didn't know. No one ever does. The wing waits. It always waits. I was already listed in the archives, recorded as deceased 15 years ago, with the time of death, 1:13 a.m. The hospital had already claimed me. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the admissions printer hummed once more. Paper slid slowly through the tray. Another intake form, another name, another life added to the system. Somewhere beyond the chain doors, the faint beeping of heart monitors and the soft squeak of gurney wheels began again, and exactly on schedule. The system continued. It never stops. It never lets go. "Welcome back," the typed words read on the fresh sheet. And somewhere deep inside the North Wing, I was still there, stepping into a shift I would never leave.
They tell you a fire lookout's job is simple. Watch for smoke, log weather changes, and report anything unusual. They don't tell you what unusual actually means. On my first day, I was given one rule that stood out from the rest. Do not answer the radio after midnight. No reason, no exceptions, just that. At the time, I assumed it was a joke, some hazing ritual meant to scare off new hires. After all, radio silence at night wasn't exactly rare. Most nights, the only thing you hear up there is wind pushing through trees, like it's searching for something it lost. I should have asked why. But every time I opened my mouth to ask questions, the ranger who trained me had a way of making silence feel like the smarter option. I took the job because I wanted quiet. After years in a cubicle, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, phones ringing for problems that didn't matter, the idea of sitting alone in a tower overlooking miles of forest felt like relief. The pay wasn't great, the hours were worse, but I figured boredom would be the biggest challenge. I was wrong. The tower itself was old, older than it looked. Wood darkened by decades of weather. Windows thick enough to distort the tree line slightly, like you were always looking through water. The radio sat on a metal desk bolted to the floor, its casing scratched and worn smooth in places where hands had rested too often. Before leaving, the ranger pointed at it. "Radio checks every hour," he said. "Day or night." Then he hesitated. "And after midnight," he added, not meeting my eyes. "You only listen." That was it. No follow-up. No explanation. The first few nights were uneventful. Radio checks came through clean. Dispatch, other towers, the occasional ranger vehicle reporting movement near access roads. After midnight, nothing. Just static, low and constant, like distant rain. I started to relax. That's how the job gets you. Around my third week, just after midnight, the radio crackled louder than usual. The static shifted, forming a shape, like it was trying to organize itself. Then a voice came through. "Tower 7, radio check." It was calm, professional, male. The kind of voice you trust without thinking about it. My hand hovered over the transmit button out of habit. Then I remembered the rule. I didn't respond. A pause followed, long enough that I wondered if the signal had cut out. Tower 7, the voice repeated. Confirm status. Everything about it sounded right. Proper call sign, correct protocol. Even the cadence was familiar. Still, I stayed silent. Another pause. Then the voice changed, not in tone, but in focus. Conditions are clear tonight, it said. Visibility's good. You can see far from up there. That wasn't part of any radio check. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the radio, heart picking up speed for no reason I could justify. I know you can hear me. The voice continued. You're scheduled until 6, same as always. I didn't move. Eventually, the transmission faded back into static. I told myself it was interference, a crossed signal, someone at dispatch messing around. Still, I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same voice. This time, it didn't bother with procedure. You're earlier on your checks tonight, it said. Everything okay up there? That got my attention. I had been early, only by a few minutes, but still. I glanced at the logbook on the desk. My handwriting stared back at me, neat and boring and human. I stayed silent. The radio crackled softly. You don't have to answer, the voice said, almost reassuring. I already know. The transmission ended. I checked the logs the next morning. There was an entry logged at 12:07 a.m. Tower 7, all clear. I hadn't written it. I brought it up to the ranger the next day. He listened without interrupting, eyes fixed on the forest beyond the tower windows. When I finished, he nodded once. You answered, he said. No, I corrected. I didn't. He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was measuring something. Did it stop talking? Yes. He nodded again. That's answering. After that, the voice started using my name. Not immediately. It eased into it. At first, it referred to me indirectly. You up there. Or Tower 7. Then one night, casual as anything, it said, long shift tonight, isn't it? I felt cold all over. The name came the following night, said softly, like it didn't want anyone else to hear. I didn't sleep at all after that. Things escalated slowly. The voice began predicting small things. Weather changes before they happened. A branch falling near the tower seconds before I heard it. The exact moment I'd stand up from my chair. Once, it commented on a thought I hadn't spoken aloud. That was the night I almost answered. Not because I wanted to, but because for a split second, it felt rude not to. That realization scared me more than the voice itself. The ranger eventually explained. Not directly. He never explained anything directly. The radio doesn't transmit after midnight, he said one morning. It receives. Receives what? He shrugged. Patterns, habits, voices, names. I asked him how long this had been going on. Longer than the towers, he replied. One night, the voice changed. It wasn't alone anymore. Other voices filtered in behind it, faint and overlapping, all speaking in the same professional tone. Different pitches, different rhythms, all calm, all patient. They started addressing other towers, towers I knew had been abandoned years ago. I heard responses, voices I recognized, some I didn't. I checked the radio logs again. Every response was recorded, all in my handwriting. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the familiarity. The voices sounded like people who knew the job, who belonged there, who had been listening longer than I had. One night, the radio clicked on by itself. No static, no build-up. Just my own voice, coming through clear and steady. Tower 7, radio check. I didn't move. Everything's fine, my voice continued. All clear. The transmission ended. I unplugged the radio after that. The logs still updated. I'm still here. I still don't answer after midnight. But sometimes when the static gets loud, I hear new voices learning the rules, asking questions, making the same mistakes I almost did. And occasionally, just occasionally, I hear my name spoken in a tone that sounds almost grateful, like I taught them something important. They tell you a fire lookout's job is simple. They're right. You just have to know when not to speak. Thanks for sipping tonight's tale with Haunted Brew. Don't forget to subscribe and sleep tight if you still can.